Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. It's Gerard O'Donovan here, introducing our latest, and I have to say, fantastic Foresight Lecture by a most magnificent lady who I will come to in just one moment. For those of you that are relatively new to the Alpha Group has been going for 10 years now, an English-based business, part of Noble Manhattan Worldwide. It is a peer-to-peer executive board. We are now in 31 countries, and we are classed as the fastest growing peer-to-peer executive board network in the world. The Alpha Group works exclusively and only with business owners. In any city, no matter how big, no matter how many thousand businesses, we will only ever allow 20 business owners to join any one Alpha Group. An Alpha Group meets once every calendar month. They usually meet physically. They meet around a board table, roughly from 7:30 a.m. until about 2 p.m. We have a very specific group of activities we go through that are copyrighted. They are bespoke to the Alpha Group, and we make one promise and one promise only to our members, and that is that we will double the value of their business in 2 to 3 years. And so far, ladies and gentlemen, we have never failed. We're even more exclusive than I originally mentioned. Not only do we only allow 20 members in any one Alpha Group, we never allow 2 people in the same industry. So if it was a city like Cairo or London or Istanbul with tens of thousands of hotels, only one hotel owner would ever be allowed to join. So very, very exclusive indeed. So now let me move on to the reason for today. We have a most incredible, unusual, and magnificent speaker. Mona is going to talk about a subject that is dear to my heart, a subject that should be dear to all of your hearts, those of you that are looking to build, grow, expand, and develop a business. And the subject is building digital communities. And today, ladies and gentlemen, getting customers, building relationships, building communities, building tribes is what it is all about. Mona is coming to us today from Cairo. She's spent the last few years in the UK, just very recently moved to Cairo. She herself is an expert in this particular arena. She is the owner and founder of EPN Limited, which is a technologically driven community startup. And it connects and it empowers professionals all over the world. So we're extremely fortunate, extremely lucky and blessed to have Mona with us today. Now, during her talk, if you have any questions, please type them into the chat box. Mona will finish and she will leave time at the end to then answer those questions. So without further ado, let me hand over to Mona. Mona, it's absolutely lovely to have you with us today.
Thank you, Jared. You're very, very kind in your introduction. I am so pleased to be with you guys here today, talking about one of my favorite topics in the world, community building. I do believe that we need a lot more positive and meaningful connections all around the world, especially at this time, now more than ever. And I'd love to share with you guys some of my thoughts and kind of like learnings through my own story over the last few years. So I will share with you a little bit about myself and a little bit about the story of EPN, which is a community startup, as Jared said. I'll also go through some of my kind of like take on how community building is evolving around the world most recently, and there has been a lot of changes. And I'll finish off by some thoughts on, you know, kind of like a good framework for building communities and kind of like the 5 main pillars that you would need to think about. So I will share my screen right now. Whilst I do so, I would really love it if you could please type in the chat what you're hoping to get out of this session. If there's, you know, if there's one key thing you want to learn or want to ask about, I'd love it if you just take a moment to do that whilst I sort my slides out. hopefully you guys can start seeing my screen now. Okay, if you can see my screen, please just type yes. Fantastic. All right. Okay, let's get started. So my name is Mona. I come from Egypt. I was born in the UK. I actually also grew up in Ivory Coast in Australia. So I've kind of moved quite a few times in my life. And I think because I've had to start over many times, I kind of like built, an extreme appreciation for connecting people and building connections. And I think that's probably, as I self-reflect, that's probably where my love of building communities came from. I am a strategic marketer by trade. I've worked most of my life with multinational organizations such as Johnson & Johnson, Cadbury Schweppes. I've worked in both B2B and B2C environments. And then most recently, the last 3 years, my life kind of took a bit of an accidental turn when I started off a Facebook group in March of 2019 called EPN, and EPN stands for Egyptian Professionals Network. I was a regional marketing director in the UK at the time, and I decided to just almost on a whim, I decided to start off a Facebook group to connect success-driven Egyptian professionals from all around the world. And EPN was launched back then. I kind of, I had little did I know how things would evolve from there. But that kind of, passion or hobby of mine ended up actually being my full-time job. I'm kind of, we established a company called EPN Limited. We launched a platform called Unlock. I'll speak about both in a minute. I quit my full-time corporate career, decided to focus full-time on community building. I actually moved myself and my family from the UK to Egypt to focus on this and grow it further. And through the process of that, I became quite close to the Facebook communities team. As a community, we're a Facebook community managed partner. I was one of the very first people in the world to gain the new community Facebook community manager accreditation, which I'll also speak about later on in my presentation. And that's, that's a little bit about me. So if we start off by defining a little bit what are communities, I think it's, in a nutshell, really, it's a group of people coming together for a sense of either belonging, connection, or purpose. There is, there's something common between them. So they're either longing for some sort of a sense of belonging, especially if, for example, if they're a minority group in a certain setting, or they're moving countries like myself, or various different needs for belonging or connection, if they share a common passion or hobby, or require, need to share knowledge or share experience, then they probably want to connect with like-minded people, or purpose as well. There are a lot of communities that are driven, purpose-driven. Many, obviously, really worthwhile causes around the world for that. So in EPN, we say that we are focused on doing two things: building meaningful connections, because I believe that connections have multiple layers. You can meet somebody at a conference or at an event or in the street or at a party, and you can introduce yourself, say your name, say what you do, and that's kind of like it. And that's not necessarily a meaningful connection. So we try and build the types of connections, or start the types of conversations, or the types of engagements that actually take this to a much deeper layer, where people start to have truly meaningful, value-added, and potentially transformative experiences. And the flip side of that is, we believe that when we build meaningful connections, this ultimately always going to be positive impact. So those are the two things that we're always trying to achieve within our own community. What is our community about? So we're a global collaborative community of 10,000 what we call success-driven Egyptian professionals. We started off on a Facebook group. It still exists today, and it's still our primary kind of like channel of engagement. And we also do a lot of offline, online, virtual events, social gatherings, professional workshops. We have a monthly newsletter as well, excuse me, a club on Clubhouse, multiple different platforms, multiple different ways in which our community comes together. But ultimately, this is in a nutshell what EPN is. When we say success-driven, we have some eligibility criteria, and we actually vet all our members to make sure that they fit that criteria. In a nutshell, we look for people who are like-minded, who are either high achievers in their careers by now, or they show signs of what we call high potential. So they could be younger professionals, but they're already showing really, really promising signs. So they're all people who really want to advance their careers, and we try and connect them in value-added ways. I've spoken about EPN quite a bit now. One of the things that we're quite proud of is that we have a 95% engagement rate on a monthly basis. We're now in our third year, and that's quite consistent. So we've managed to build quite a thriving, really highly engaged community. And we also, in December of 2020, we decided to take this a step further. If we go back to the whole concept of meaningful connections, by launching a platform that's called Unlock. It's a B2B professional services matching platform for Egyptian professional service providers. It's a website, and people can go onto that website, search for professional services such as marketing, accounting, legal, IT, software development, coaching, consulting, etc., and directly engage and reach out to those professional service providers. So we're running the two alongside each other at the moment. And the story that I've just shared with you, it basically culminated in us being recognized as one of the most impactful communities in the world. So in 2020, we were recognized by Facebook as one of the top 77 communities globally. We took part in the first community accelerator program that Facebook launched last year for community startups. We were included in a report by NYU, which featured and interviewed the top 50 digital communities globally. And I was recognized by Facebook and also featured on Vogue on International Women's Day this year, amongst 25 other of whom they call the top female-led digital communities in the MENA region. So let's talk about digital communities now. Why do they actually matter? I think communities have always mattered since the very beginning of time, and digital communities matter, more than anything right now. I'm sure you've got some ideas of your own, but let me share with you a couple of thoughts. So YouGov and YouGov Institute and New York University, that survey that I just mentioned that we were featured in, they surveyed 50 digital communities, but they also surveyed hundreds of people, like all of us from all around the world, from multiple different countries and cultures and stages in life. And they asked them about who their most important group is at the moment, whether it's their local church or football club or school or university or preferred Facebook group, etc., etc. And astonishingly, 73% of people from all around the world said that they believe that the most important group that they're part of is actually an online community. This is what they believe is the most kind of like value-added space where they can go and express themselves or connect or ask a question or share something that they're passionate or interested in. So I think for people, I think it's kind of like human nature that we all need some sort of connection or a feeling of belonging. We also need to feel that we're growing, learning, getting exposed to new things. And we also feel this, we all feel this inherent need to actually also give back, either give back knowledge or help or support in multiple different ways. And I think digital communities enable us to do so. And the beauty of it is obviously it transcends all the typical limitations that we would have. So in terms of geography, obviously, if we're all, in our local environment, that means we're only limited to the people within our own vicinity. Or again, with our personal networks, we're limited by whom we actually know, or the friends of our friends, or whom our professional network knows and can introduce us to. And also obviously pandemics having to do everything virtually. Whereas with digital communities, you can actually find yourself having the most fascinating and even life-changing conversation with a complete stranger halfway around the world. And that is only really possible through digital communities. I believe that digital communities are also really important for organizations or businesses or people providing goods and services to others. And there was a report that was done earlier on this year by CMX, where they interviewed many organizations, asking them about their attitudes towards communities. And this metric actually surprised me more than the first one, because 86% of organizations in 2021 that were interviewed said that they believe that communities are critical to their company's mission. Now, I believe that 5 years ago, that number wouldn't have been the same. I do strongly believe that with, especially in the last 2 to 3 years, organizations are really kind of like waking up to the fact that communities are a very, very powerful and important aspect that they need to kind of like embed within their own culture. Being that close to their stakeholders and their audience and their customers is really, really critical, I believe, to a lot of organizations' success moving forward. And I'm really happy that, increasingly organizations are also starting to recognize that. So I want to give you like a quick story here. This is I don't know if any of you recognize what this picture is of, but it's basically Canva, which is an online tool to help you design really beautiful presentations or social media posts, etc. If you are not, a creative graphic designer, you can actually end up doing things which look very, very professional through Canva. And Canva had their own community when they first launched on Facebook. They had a Facebook group which was doing okay, and then they realized actually that there was one individual who was doing it 1,000,000 times better than they were. So there was this gentleman who did social media services for a living. Him and his girlfriend decided that they want to travel the world. So they packed up and they were living, a few weeks in different countries and just traveling all around the world, having a great time and financing it through their work on social media. And at one point in time, that person, he had been using Canva as his main kind of design tool, and he became really good at it. So he decided to start a Facebook community to share tips and tricks around using Canva. His community was very, very engaged and very value added, and it kind of like snowballed into this huge, very, very very successful and engaged community with hundreds of thousands of individuals. And so Canva realized that he was doing it way better than them. And one of the Canva co-founders actually joined his Facebook group. They watched him quietly for a few weeks, and then they approached him. And I believe they bought his community and also gave him the head of communities role at Canva. And he's been there, I think, for a couple of years now. And really, the Canva kind of like community has been one of the main tools of growth since then. So I think this is like quite a good example of how organizations don't necessarily always have the right tools or resources to build really thriving communities, even though they know they need to and they want to. It's not as simple as that. You kind of really need to have the people on board that really and truly understand how to build engaging and thriving communities. And in many cases, you will find that the community builders or the community managers are individuals who are truly passionate about what they do, as opposed to, you know, having somebody who's already on the team and then asking them, you know, adding it to their job description and asking them to, you know, start a community and manage it. It's not always as simple as that. And I think, again, that's another thing that a lot of organizations and all of us really need to start understanding, is that it is quite a special skill in and of itself. So I believe that brands, organizations, entities that really take the time to listen, understand, engage, and respond to their stakeholders' needs are those who will win the trust and loyalty of their customers. And community management, when done right, really helps organizations foster engagement. So they're actually having conversations with their customers, and they're really kind of and having two-way conversations. So they're not just, you know, disseminating information out, they're actually also listening as well. It enables them to offer different types of experiences to their customers, and also it helps them have really significant and very, very deep, insightful moments, which could actually inform their products and services and pipeline and even strategy and how they and even their business model as well. So I mentioned at the beginning of my talk that I think that there are signs of changing tides, and that community management is kind of like, I feel it's moving from something that, as I said, individuals, amateurs, hobbyists, or campaigners, etc., do, to actually becoming more and more of a recognized profession. And I want to share with you a few things. So first of all, Facebook, which is one of the biggest platforms for communities in the world, launched their first accelerator program, which is designed for community startups last year in 2020, and we were part of their very first cohort. Why did they do that? I think it's because they recognize that that we have all around the world, there are multiple accelerators for typical startups, a tech-driven startup, or, you know, any startup doing a product or service. However, community startups are a little bit different, because community startups don't necessarily have a product or service at their core. What they always do is they have a community at their core, and then they start offering products and services for that community. And because they're community driven, the types of products or services that they offer will always be guided by the community and will change. So it's not, so the focus is not on the product, the focus is on the community first. And by default, by nature, this is a very different type of startup than a regular startup. And so Facebook pioneered this accelerated program last year. They're doing it again this year, bigger, better, and more far-reaching, including more countries as well. And I think that type of accelerator programs for community startups will keep on evolving. The other thing as well, and this was also driven by Facebook, is that in October of 2020, so it's not even a year old now, Facebook announced their first formal community management certification. Again, and this is the one that I was like one of the first 100 people to get certified. Again, I believe that that move was quite an important and significant move, because again, it is trying to differentiate between again, like hobbyists or regular people managing communities, and those who actually take the time, effort, and showcase the ability and the skills and the knowledge and the tools to actually manage communities in a professional manner. There are many, many elements to managing communities, from issues to do with safeguarding, data protection, conflict resolution, engagement, and many, many other aspects as well. And so ensuring that there is some sort of a benchmark within the industry really kind of like, again, moves community management into a completely different level, where it's becoming more and more of a recognized profession, and organizations that are trying to add community managers to their teams can now actually request those people to actually be certified, whether by Facebook, or I'm sure multiple other organizations will also start to follow suit very shortly. The other thing as well, this report that I mentioned by the GovLab and New York University on the power of virtual communities. This was the first global research involving 50 digital community managers and leaders. And it's quite a robust piece of work, and I've got the link to that at the end of my presentation, which I would encourage you to have a look at. There's also that report, of which I included a statistic previously, which was a global report with 460 plus organizations, again, shedding the light on the community industry. So now it's becoming an industry as well. And then in June of this year, there was an Indian company called Foresight, which made the news and the headlines as being the world's first community creator monetization platform. And they just raised $9 million in a Series A funding. What does that mean? It's basically a tech-driven startup that aggregates multiple communities under one platform, under the Foresight platform. And so communities and community leaders can actually choose to become part of the Foresight ecosystem. And by doing so, Foresight is able to provide them with aggregate insights into all the statistics of the communities combined, because they have a tool or a software that enables them to read the aggregate statistics of all the communities. But more importantly as well, it enables them to unlock a lot of corporate sponsorship deals and monetization opportunities for those communities. So for example, if 20 or 30 small to medium-sized parenting communities join Foresight, individually on their own, maybe they don't have that many options for monetization. But what Foresight does is, by aggregating them together, they're able to go to a company like P&G, for example, and tell them, hey, I have 2 million mothers on our system or on our platform, and we can strike a deal with you, and we can give you the ability to communicate with or provide information and insights, etc., to those mothers. So by aggregating it, it's opening up a lot of opportunities for the smaller communities. And so that was quite a novel concept, and it seems to be doing quite well. Most of their work is currently in Asia at the moment. So I think that the importance of communities is increasingly becoming recognized by brands or in organizations, and community management, as I said, is becoming more and more of a formal type of profession. So let's talk a little bit, because I'm cognizant of time and I want to make sure that I leave enough time for Q&A at the end. Let's talk a little bit about like the 5 main pillars that I mentioned at the beginning for building a thriving community. I think number one, we really need to start with why and understand why is it that we're building community. Hopefully it's not because we think we need to or we should do or because it's the trend at the moment. I think if there is a very clear purpose to the reason behind it, then your community is a lot likely to actually do well and to be engaged with you. So as part of that, I think it kind of like helps to break it down a little bit into what is our mission, what are the community values, what are the goals, and how are we going to measure them. So for example, for us, like our mission is to connect and enable and empower success-driven Egyptian professionals to fulfill their full potential. So we believe that by existing, we could help those professionals achieve more than what they would achieve on their own. And that's our purpose for like existing, and that's our mission. So our values are those of collaboration, knowledge sharing, and partnerships. Our goals are to create those types of opportunities for meaningful connections, and we do this via several programs that we have. So we have goals that are focused on the professional person as an individual. So for example, training goals, or recruitment or career opportunities, or social networking opportunities for like-minded individuals. So these are all goals targeting the individual. We also have goals targeting the organization that that individual leads. So as an organizational leader, they have needs to find new suppliers, new partners, new customers, or enter new markets, or also recruit. So we have a number of programs and a set of very specific goals for each of those kind of like headlines that I mentioned. And then we have measures in place to monitor and report and evaluate and analyze how well we're doing on each of those metrics. The second thing is, once we know, what we're doing and why we're doing it, is kind of like completing or drawing out our strategy and process very, very clearly. And I think the four main things to take into account when we're talking about that. Number one is personas. Who are our stakeholders and what are their different personas? As part of their personas, we by going through the exercise, we really understand what their needs are, what their pain points are, and how we can help them better. So at a very high level, for example, we have people who are, because we're an Egyptian professionals community, but a global one, we have Egyptian professionals who live all around the world. And we realize, for example, that those people have very different needs from Egyptian professionals who currently live in Egypt. So that's a very kind of like broad distinction. But then if we drill it down, you could find that there's multiple layers of personas. So for example, you could have an Egyptian professional who's been living outside of Egypt for 20, 25 years, but now they're looking to make the move back. And there's a whole subset of people like that individual who are also making the move or trying to make the move back. And they have very specific needs because they've been away from the country for a long time, so they don't really have a personal network to tap into to find job opportunities. They've a lot of the friends that they used to know from their childhood have potentially also moved on to other countries, so they also don't have like a support network to fall back onto when they go home. They don't know a lot of practical things, for example, about schooling systems for their children, or which recruitment agencies to contact, etc., etc. So understanding what they're looking for, what their needs are, and what their challenges are, and then looking at our community kind of enables us to think and recognize and also put programs in place to help this specific group of community members or this specific persona. And then we kind of repeat the same exercise for all the different personas that we have. Another thing we need to take into account is with communities is, where are we going to exist? What platforms are we going to be on? And again, there's obviously there will always be, I believe, like a physical element where possible for people to meet face to face. That's always, amazing, but it's not always possible. So when we look at digital communities, we also need to make some decisions about, are we going to build our own platform, our own technology? Are we going to go and start a community on one of the kind of like private platforms out there that you can white label, you can subscribe to and white label and essentially have your own website or your own app? Or are you going to go and use one of the tools out there, such as, for example, Facebook groups? Making all these decisions is really, really important, because each of these options actually has a benefit and also a challenge. And let me give you an example. For example, we decided to exist mostly or mainly, we decided that our main platform was going to be a Facebook group because of the because of how well Facebook is designed to promote engagement. And we wanted a really engaged and active and thriving community. And so that's amazing. But there are flip sides to that. One of them is that we don't control what our members see or who gets to be notified about what. So we're always kind of, at the mercy of the Facebook algorithm and how the Facebook algorithm works and when and whom they decide to show, for example, our posts or our announcements to. So that's a downside, or the fact that we don't necessarily like own or have access to our members' data. That's another downside. But for every downside, you can also think about alternatives. And it really depends on why. Again, if we go back with the why you're building that community will really inform what type of platform or technology you want to use. The second thing is processes. How will the whole community management work? What's the journey like for a community member from the minute or the very second they join, or even before that, from when they're thinking of joining or applying to join? What's the process look like when they join? What's their onboarding process? How do we get them up to speed with why the community exists, how it functions, and the community rules and guidelines, and what's expected of them, and how they can also make the most out of that community? So that's all part of the onboarding process. And then what is the process to keep them engaged and make sure that they're getting value out of their community throughout their duration of being part of the community? All of these things kind of don't necessarily happen, obviously, organically or by chance. They need some careful thinking behind them and some careful processes behind them. And all of this definitely requires having the right people on that community management team to really make sure it happens. You need a range of different skills. You need people who have very high people skills, very emotionally intelligent, very empathetic people who are able to listen and engage and drive conversations forward. You also need people who are very good with organization skills, people who have conflict resolution skills and multiple other skills as well. If we move on to the third kind of pillar, is continuously engaging and adding value. I think I touched upon this quite a bit already, but really engagement from my point of view means providing value-added content all the time. Now, this doesn't have to be from the internal team out. In fact, the best communities are those that manage to crowdsource that. So those that manage to create an environment where where the community members themselves are actually the ones who are sharing meaningful content, because there is no way that a single team can produce and disseminate and deliver as much value-added and engaging content as actually the community members themselves can. So I see that community building is about creating the enabling environment that allows this type of really value-added content to be constantly disseminated by the community members. The other thing is how to be an enabling platform or have enabling tools and processes and initiatives in place that create really meaningful connections based on levels of, based on interests, needs, locations, objectives, etc. And the third one is how can we utilize the community, the existing of the community, to provide our members with different experiences that they wouldn't normally have had access to if that community didn't exist. And finally, again, how does the existence of that community enable you to provide your members with benefits that they wouldn't normally have had access to? So these four things, I believe, of really four very compelling ways of adding value to your community members, because ultimately you want them to always feel that being part of that community is actually something that's enriching their lives. And this is very important, as opposed to building a so-called community, for example, to use it as a pure advertising platform or a pure marketing platform. I think people are so so cognizant now of the differences between an organization that's really trying to provide value as opposed to an organization that's just using it for pure advertising purposes, and then people tend to switch off and they don't engage as much. So it's always a very kind of like short-sighted strategy anyway. The fourth pillar is learning from your community. So really measuring and analyzing the effectiveness of what you're doing. I think there are four kind of like main things that you should be looking at. One is your reach. How many of your community members are you reaching with your activities or with your announcements or any of your initiatives? How many of them are you actually reaching? How many of them are engaging on a regular level? How well are you converting? Now, the conversion depends on what, again, if we go back to the very first pillar, what were your kind of goals and objectives? So, for example, in our case, it could be how many people were able to find business partners. For us, that's a conversion, that's a successful kind of result. And we would want to know how many of these happened, or how many people were able to find a job, for example. So these are the types of things that we would consider as successful conversions for our community. And then the fourth one is insights. Having in place some sort of an ongoing measure or process rather to gain continuous insights and feedbacks from the community members. I always like to have a range of, have two types of ways of collecting this information. One on in a quantitative way. So, for example, just getting the pulse of the community with polls, for example, something that is quantitative or numerical that you can aggregate and see, on average, X% feel that this community is providing them with value, for example, versus not, and see how that trend is going over time, together with some qualitative information about, about what they think or what their suggestions, ideas, what they would like to see, etc., and that would have a completely different, collection mechanism from the quantitative ones, but generally having a mix of quantitative and qualitative insights from your members on a regular basis is also very, very important. So I think that brings us to the last point, or the last pillar, which is how to grow and sustain your community. You need to have a plan for that. So you kind of like sow the seeds for your community, and then you're continuously evolving and growing, and ultimately you really want to make it sustainable. And to do a sustainable community, you have to know how will it be sustained, what's your business model, how are you, because communities tend to take a lot of resources to manage and build and grow, whether in resources in terms of time, people, and even financial resources. So how are you gonna be able to cover or invest all these resources on a recurring basis? Are you gonna fund that community from external sources, or are you going, or do you need the community itself to be self-sustaining? And does that mean you need to have a revenue stream coming out of your community as well? What are the types of key partnerships that you can have in place to enable your community to continue to grow and add value? And also, how are you going to be leveraging the different technology tools that you have available as well? And the data that you're kind of like collecting and analyzing, and the information that you're sharing with your members, etc. So I think those three things, it's really important to kind of like think about them, because the danger, one of the biggest dangers is like starting a community and having one person being the community manager that does it all basically, and it could work very well for a little while, but then what happens if that person is no longer able to do that? Then you haven't really built a sustainable community for the long run. So these are some things that I would encourage you to think about as well. So to kind of like conclude, I believe that digital communities are here to stay. They're gonna grow stronger. I think there's this whole trend of formalizing community management. I think the term community startups, that's a term that we've coined, by the way, at EPN, but I believe it's probably going to be a term that you hear more and more of. which is the whole concept of startups that are powered by communities as opposed to a normal startup. I think that whole concept is going to be here to stay, and we're going to see a lot more community startups worldwide. I think the wider ecosystem has become a lot more kind of alert to the importance and the potential impact of having digital communities as part of a wider strategic component for businesses and organizations. And I think technology platforms will continue to evolve with the giants such as Facebook or WhatsApp or Quora, etc., as well as smaller players that will actually, I believe, will continue to disrupt and build new platforms that we can use for different types of community engagement. I'm going to end with this statement here, which is what we always share with our members within EPN, and we believe that it's one of the kind of like secret sources that has made EPN such an engaged platform, is that we always tell our members to start by giving first and to continuously give more than they take. And we believe that when community members approach their community that way, they will always end up taking in abundance. So within EPN, for example, a subject matter expert who joins the community and starts by sharing knowledge, useful resources, articles, his or her own experience, etc., without asking for anything back, just by continuously doing so, actually ends up being recognized as a subject matter expert. And then whenever somebody actually has a need for such a skill set, they're the first person that they will think of, and they're the first person that they will reach out to. And we have so many community members that have actually kind of like built that reputation that way and ended up having a lot more professional connections and ultimately also a lot more business out of that mindset. And it's just one of the things that we believe in. This is also how we manage our own community. So we started off and we still do by always focusing on how can we support and enable and empower our community members as opposed to what can we take out of it. And I think that's taken us places that we would have never thought we would go to because of that mindset. And I would encourage you all to have that mindset. And if you're going to start a community or build a community or grow a community, I would encourage you again to have that mindset and try and instill it within your own community. I'm gonna see if I can share some of these links through the Alpha group. I've got here some links for some further reading, really interesting resources if you're interested in the subject, and I would encourage you to have a look at that. And I'm going to stop here and see if you've got any questions. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mona. That was absolutely wonderful. While we're waiting for people to type their questions, and everyone, please, 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 if you have any questions for Mona, type them into the chat box. Or if not a question, a thought, an observation, a feeling, an aha moment from today. While I was listening to Mona, I made quite a few notes myself. What I found astounding was the percentage figure she gave at the beginning. 73% of the people contacted wanted and preferred and felt that their online community was the most important to them. That is unbelievable. It really is. Who would have thought? And then I loved hearing about Canva. We've used Canva a lot in Noble Manhattan, but it's an incredible tool. I would urge all of you to look at that, as Mona suggested. It's powerful, it's useful, it's helpful, it's everything full. The overall message from all of this was really the need to build a community. If you are a coach, a trainer, an entrepreneur, a businesswoman, a businessman looking to build, grow, create, and develop, really communities are where it is at. And I guess the overall message is we, us, all of us need to build our communities for our future. And of course, the other helpful bit of information she gave was that company called Foresight. I hadn't come across them, so I will definitely look them up and see what's available. So looking at the chat, so Elizabeth has said, thank you very much, Mona. Aisha, thank you, Mona, for sharing. Short, simple, inspirational, wonderful. Kola said, I got the answers to my questions. Thank you, Mona. Nedco, thank you, Mona. You have built something great. Do you have any plans to grow internationally? Over to you, Mona.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Netco. Well, we are already international in the sense that our community is global. So our members exist in 90 countries and over 120 different cities. That's for the EPN part of it. So we kind of like run two things in parallel now. We started with the EPN community, but it kind of evolved from there into us launching Unlock, our professional services matching platform. That platform began, the idea behind that platform came from our community, and this is one of the ways that we were actually able to grow our impact and sustain and monetize our community in a value-added way. So what happened, and allow me to just quickly share that story, and then I'll get to your answer. What happened is that we found that within our own community, we had a lot of professional service providers and also a lot of professional service seekers coming to EPN all the time to ask for recommendations and trying to connect with each other. But because we predominantly at that time existed on a Facebook group, there were kind of inherent challenges with connecting those two together, because it kind of depends on who sees your post when and if they have time to respond to it, etc., etc. So we identified the need. We realized that we had both stakeholders existing within our community. We launched that platform called Unlock, powered by EPN. It's its own website. It's subscription based. So it gave us a revenue stream, and it enabled people to be actually able to go and search and connect with professional services providers through that platform. We called it Unlock on purpose because we didn't want to limit it to just a pure, just an Egyptian audience. So we didn't call it EPN, which stands for Egyptian Professionals Network. We called it Unlock, which is a more, it's representative of what we're trying to do, unlock opportunities, but it's also, a more international name that would enable us to grow it into different markets and countries, and that is very much the intention. And today, even today, because as I mentioned, we're a global community, the professional services providers that are listed on the platform live all around the world, and also the professional service seekers that go and use that platform are also based all around the world, because the beauty of professional services is a lot of it can actually be delivered virtually. It's not a physical, good that you need to ship. So most services are actually potentially could be done virtually, and so even today we're connecting, a professional service provider that resides in the US with a customer that is in Australia, or somebody who's actually in Kenya with a customer in the UK. So these types of connections are happening at the moment. They all tend to have an Egyptian flavor because that's probably how they heard about Unlock in the first place. But it is very much our intention to do this, take this more globally.
Great. So there's been quite a few comments and questions. So I forgive me if I don't get to them all, but one, Enrique says, are you going to be sharing the presentation? Yes, we are. It is being recorded, and it will be up on the Alpha Group website within maybe 2 days. So, okay. And Peter says, what monetization strategies are proving appropriate for digital communities?
This is an excellent question. I think there's a huge range, and it really depends on what your community does and who your audience is. So I've seen a range of different monetization strategies. At a very high level, you could either monetize through your own community members. So you could offer them, membership fees, or you could offer them services that they would need to pay money to gain access to those services, etc. So that's one way of going about it. The other way is through sponsorships or collaborations or partnerships, where you actually have, one big entity or a number of entities that kind of sponsor your community. So it kind of depends on whether, again, you want to keep this community open, accessible, available to everybody and try and monetize elsewhere, or whether you want to keep it more focused and niche and give more of like, maybe more personalized services, etc. And that type of community, you'd probably need to monetize through your own community members. And I've seen communities that do a mix of both. And so to be honest, I did leave my email at the end. If you wanna discuss with me in more details, I think that you do need to, you really need to identify a little bit more what type of community you're referring to and what your objectives are. And I think that would inform the best monetization strategy for it.
Great, thank you. And again, I'm just reading down, there's so many more. Thank you. Love the last mantra. Thank you by giving. Okay, here's one from Peter again. What are your thoughts on a digital community losing its authenticity if it is created and run by a commercial brand or company?
I think as long as communities are providing value, that's what matters. People want to be part of communities that enrich their life or give them access to knowledge, information, experiences, tools, resources, or opportunities to give back and be impactful, all these types of things. People want to be part of these types of communities. They don't want to be part of a community that advertises to them or that preaches to them, or that is basically like holding a mic and talking to them. What people want to be part of is communities that are mostly almost kind of like driven by the community itself. And I think I probably mentioned the term quite a few times, where we believe that we are like enablers, that our role is like to create the right environment, the right tools and processes that enable the community members to connect, engage, and create value together. So I don't think it matters as much whether that community is run by a brand or an individual. As long as these things are happening and people are seeing the value, then I think this is what defines an authentic community. And many brands, many brands can have authenticity in that way, in my opinion.
All right, thank you. I'm just aware now we're at the hour, so if we just give it 2 more minutes, a couple of very quick questions. So from Sinomi, very impressive, Mona. Thank you so much. Makes much sense. And then her question: how big is your team and what are the main roles?
I love that. So we are 2 co-founders for our kind of community and our company. And then we have a team. Right now, today, we have 2 full-time members on our team, 1 part-time member. So we're a team of like 4.5, if you will. And we work with, with a number of agencies and partners and freelancers for a number of different things that we need. So I think we're quite a small and lean team. Every few months we add on 1 person, and hopefully we'll continue to grow our team from there. So yeah.
And the last question, in fact, it's not the last question. There's been so many, but because of time, from Xenia, this is a lovely question. Any technical tips or tricks you can share?
The most important one, I would say, is to be really data-driven. When you're dealing with communities, there's a large amount of information that you need to kind of like deal with, that you have access to and that you come across, and that you need to utilize, again, in a value-added way. So just from the get-go, having a strategy in place for what type of data you need to collect, how you're going to use it, how you're going to protect it and be GDPR compliant, where is it going to be stored, and who will have access to it, how are you going to kind of like build that whole kind of, how are you going to become a responsible data-driven organization. And the sooner you do that, the better, because if you do this halfway through the process, you would have lost a lot of important insights and data and ability to make impact, and B, it's a lot more complex to do later on down the road.
Well, thank you, Mona, and thank you so much for a magnificent presentation and some wonderful hints, tips, thoughts, overview. and ideas. I thought it was magnificent. And to all of you who registered and those who will watch the recording, thank you also for your greatest gift, your time. So thank you. Have a wonderful either morning,